Psalm's going to be Psalm number 226. Our scripture reader today is Ryder Reed.
Today's scripture reading comes from 2 Corinthians 4, verses 16 to 18. Therefore we do not lose heart. Though outwardly we are wasting away, yet inwardly we are being renewed day by day. For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. So we fix our eyes on what is seen, we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but what is unseen, since what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal. Brother Ben.
Well, good morning. Good morning. It is really good to see everybody. I never thought in the world that I would be as excited as I am to have 28 people here for worship service on a Sunday morning. It is so good to see everybody here this morning. I'm afraid I hurt some feelings this morning, didn't I, Craig? Well, before we got started, I said, I'm so excited to have some people in here. I've been looking at the same 6 or 8 for the last 7 weeks, and the 6 or 8 that have been here, I think I kind of hurt their feelings. But I have loved looking at the 6 or 8 of you for the last 7 weeks, but I'm just so much happy. Not happy. I'm going to stop. I'm going to stop. I am about to get in some serious trouble. I am just so happy that we have the ability that we have we have a little larger group here this morning. It's just good. It looks like a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. So let's just keep our prayers up that this works, that there's not a huge resurgence and we have to turn around and go back again. Let's just hope that we get to keep marching forward from here. So everybody use your best social distancing practices even when we come together and everything. But it is good to have everybody here. Now, I got a text back there a few minutes ago from Sean and Amanda. Kathy got her test back and it is negative. She does not have COVID-19. So I actually got that right before the first prayer, and I was telling Jason back there, I said I went up to do the first prayer and I got that text, and I meant to mention it before and then say a prayer of thanks for Kathy, but I launched right into the prayer, and then when I was glancing down at the sheet, I saw her name, and I thought, well, I don't want to thank for Kathy now because nobody knows what's going on, but now you all know what's going on. She got a negative test, and we're happy about that, so thank you, Lord, for that and all the blessings that you give us. If you notice, the title to our sermon this morning is Staying Positive Under Pressure. We are going to talk about that a little bit this morning because we as a nation, as a world really at this point right now with everything that's been going on, we have been under a lot of pressure. And sometimes that pressure just seems to build up until it boils out. So we're going to talk about that a little bit this morning. I know I've got Matthew 7 up there. We are going to go to Matthew 7, but not right off the bat. Actually, we're not going to get to Matthew 7 until later. We're going to start this morning over in the book of Exodus, so you can work your way over to Exodus if you want. We're going to start here in a few minutes over in the 14th chapter. So Exodus 14, we'll be over there here in just a few minutes. I kind of started thinking about this sermon, about how we respond when we're under pressure, just a little bit over a week ago. And I finally decided that this was going to be what I preached on this morning. Now, it seems like for the last 7 to 8 weeks, a lot of the sermons have encircled around what we're going through as a nation, what we're going through as a people with this coronavirus that's going around, with the social distancing that's happening, with us being quarantined, with everything that's taking place. And I've thought about the pressure that we're really under. There really is a lot of pressure that is being placed on a lot of people during all of this. And it can kind of get to us after a time. About a week and a half ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, I had gone to, I'm going to go ahead and say it because it's going to work out good for them in the long run. I had gone to Home Depot. And I had purchased a washer, a power washer, one of those high pressure washers. And I specifically went online and ordered it online because I'm wanting to do all the social distancing thing. I want to keep myself safe, keep my family safe, and anybody else I come in contact with. So I went online. I ordered it online for their curbside pickup so that I would have a minimum amount of contact with anybody. So I got the order okay on my email, so I headed down to Home Depot. I pulled up to their curbside pickup. Gentleman came out, told him my order number and everything. He went back in, brought my power washer out, put it in the back of my truck for me. Everything was good. I got home. Didn't have time to mess with it that day, but a couple of days later, I was ready to do a little bit of power washing. So I got the pressure washer out of the back of the truck, opened up the box, and lo and behold, if the spray nozzle was not missing. Now, a power washer without a spray nozzle is worthless. This came at the end of a very long day when I had been working outside and I had had some other issues and some other problems, some things that hadn't worked the way that I wanted them to work. And here I open up this brand new piece of equipment and there's a part missing out of it. Well, I've got to be honest with you. I'm just going to put it out there, folks. Your preacher was not a very nice person that afternoon when that happened. I got on the phone and I called Home Depot. And the girl answered on the service desk, and I explained to her what was going on. And I said, it's a brand new power washer. I've got to bring it back because there's a part missing in there. I specifically ordered this online for curbside pickup, so here's what you're going to do. You're going to have me another one sitting on the curbside, and I'm going to come down there, and we're going to exchange that. And she said, sir, we can't do that. We can't do returns on the curbside. You have to bring the return in. You have to bring it to the service desk. And I said, well, have somebody bring one up to the service desk so I can exchange it for you. And she said, we don't do exchanges. We will credit you back, and then you'll have to go pull another one, and you'll have to repurchase the item. And I said, so I went through online to do all of this to avoid having to come in contact with a lot of people. And now I'm going to have to come in contact with 4 times as many people. I'm going to have to go to the service desk. I'm going to have to go through the store. Then I'm going to have to go through the checkout line. I'm going to have to do all of this. But I could have just came in and done it that way in the first place. Isn't this the whole idea of social distancing, what I did in the first place? But now you're going to have me come in and do all this. I tell you what I'll do. I'll bring it to the service desk. You can credit me back, and I'll drive to Sherman and go to Lowe's, and I'll buy me a power washer over there. Now, was that very nice of the preacher to act? And then I hung up the phone. Well, by the time I got back down to Home Depot, I had started to calm down a little bit, and I had breathed a little bit, and I had ranted and raved at my wife a little bit, then my daughter on the phone a little bit, and both of them were like, just go exchange it. What's the big deal? Well, I get down, and I had calmed down, and I went into the service desk, went through all of it, got my, credit back, went back and found another one, came up and purchased the other one, started to go home. And I went out and I was sitting in my truck and I thought, wow, that was not very preacherly of me the way I acted on the phone a little while ago. And I should make amends for that. So I got out of my truck and I went back in. Now I'm just flirting with COVID-19 because I'm in and out all the time. But I go back in and I go to the service desk. And I asked the girl that's at the service desk, I said, are you the young lady that I talked to a little while ago on the phone when I called about this pressure washer? And she said, no, it wasn't me. And I said, would you have any idea who it was? And she gave me a name. She said, I'm sure it was so-and-so. Her and I are the only two that have been working back here today, but she's off on break. And I said, well, I don't want to disturb her on break. Would you give her a message for me? And she said, sure. And I said, would you tell her the guy, the jerk that called, that's what I told her. I said, would you tell her the jerk that called earlier about the pressure washer apologizes for what he did? I said, it came at the end of a long day. I was just fed up with everything that had gone wrong, and that was like the cherry on the top. And I let it all out on her, and I apologized. And you know what the girl behind the desk told me? The girl behind the desk said, it's fine. She said, we hear it every day from a lot of people. And she said, and it's gotten worse over the last few weeks. Everybody's under a lot of pressure. She said, but I will pass on your message to her, which made me feel a little bit better. But then I got to thinking about it, and I thought, we all are under a lot of pressure. And how are we handling that? I mean, I want you to think about the pressure that we're under. There are people who have lost their lives because of this that's going on. There are people that are hospitalized because of this that's going on. We have, I don't even know how many tens of thousands that have perished. I know 250,000 that are ill with it. We have people who have lost their financial security because of this. They've lost their jobs. They don't have a paycheck coming in. We have small businesses that are going under that literally probably will not recover. I think by the time this thing's said and done, you're going to see a whole bunch of small businesses, personal family-owned businesses, some of them that have been around for years and years and years that will not be able to come back. There is the whole mental thing of this being distanced, of this quarantine, of us being off on our own where, we can still talk to people, but we can't come face to face. And here we have 28 that's came here this morning, but it was elbow bumps and waves from a distance. And this is a church that likes to hug. I mean, when you think about all the pressure and everything that's going on, and then we don't know when this is going to end. It looks like maybe there's a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel, but we don't know. We just don't know. Government doesn't know. The experts don't know. Nobody knows. That's the big thing, is there's just so much that's unknown. My daughter called me yesterday and she said, I just saw a thing that the CDC is already coming out with recommendations for next school year. No recesses. That the kids won't have community lunches, that they'll have to have lunch in their classrooms, that the classrooms will have to be downsized, that they'll have to stagger classes. And she said, for next year already? We don't know. And the pressure just seems to build up and build up and build up. And how do we respond to it? I mean, how do we stay positive? How do we keep a good attitude? It was within 24 hours after I got home from Home Depot and after I had made a fool of myself and then went in and apologized and then thought about it some. It was within 24 hours of that I see Lisa Gaston makes a post on Facebook. And Lisa posts this, it was a forward that she had found somewhere. But it says, as the governors across the country are trying to figure out how to ease back into a new normal for our country, please remember these things. Some people agree with the state opening. That's okay. Just be kind. Some people are still planning on staying home and not getting out. That's okay. Just be kind. Some people are scared of getting the virus and they're worried about a second wave happening. That's okay. Just be kind. Some are sighing with relief because they get to go back to work and they know that they may not lose their business now or maybe their homes. That's okay. Be kind. Some are thankful that they can finally have that surgery that they've put off. That's okay. Be kind. Some will be able to attend interviews after weeks without a job. That's okay. Just be kind. Some will wear masks for weeks or maybe even months to come. That's okay. Just be kind. Some people will rush out to get their hair or their nails done. That's okay. Just be kind. The point is, everyone has different viewpoints. Everyone has different feelings. And that's okay. Just be kind. We each have a different story. If you need to stay home, stay home. If you want to get out, get out. But just be kind. How do we stay positive under pressure? Well, I'm going to tell you one thing for sure, is we could just be kind. And we can realize, as the mantra is going right now across the nation, we're all in this together. We're all facing this unknown together. So I started thinking to myself, we got all this pressure going on. There's financial pressure, there's job loss pressure, there's health pressure, there's just the mental aspect of all of it going on. How do we respond under pressure, and how do we go about staying positive under pressure? So I thought, I'm going to go back and I'm going to look at some stories in the Bible of people who were under pressure and what they did and how they responded to it, what they did right and what they did wrong. So we're going to look at 3 stories from the Old Testament this morning. And each one of these stories are people that are under pressure and what they did. Some of them handled it well, some of them didn't. But there's lessons that we can learn in there from staying positive while we're under pressure. So look with me over here to Exodus, the 14th chapter. This is the first story that we're going to look at this morning. Exodus chapter 14. We're going to start in the 5th verse. Exodus chapter 14. We're going to start in the 5th verse. Now this is when the Israelites have been freed from their bondage of the Egyptians. Moses has came, he has performed the miracles before Pharaoh, and now Pharaoh has told them leave. And after over 400 years of captivity, the Israelites are free. They're allowed to go back home to their land of Canaan. And they have packed up all of their things and they have headed out, and Moses is leading them, and they've come to the Red Sea. And we all know this story. We've learned it ever since we were just children in Sunday school. They get to the banks of the Red Sea. They have the sea in front of them, and guess what's going to come up behind them? Look in the 5th verse of chapter 14. When the king of Egypt was told that the people had fled, Pharaoh and his officials changed their minds about them and said, "What have we done? We've let the Israelites go and have lost their services." So he had his chariot made ready, and he took his army with him. He took 600 of his best chariots, along with all the other chariots of Egypt, with officers over all of them. The Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, so that he pursued the Israelites who were marching out boldly. The Egyptians, all Pharaoh's horses and chariots, horsemen and troops, pursued the Israelites and overtook them as they camped by the sea near Pith-Harath, opposite of Baal-zephon. As Pharaoh approached, the Israelites looked up, and there were the Egyptians marching after them. They were terrified, and they cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses, "Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us to die in the desert? What have you done to us by bringing us out of Egypt? Didn't we say to you in Egypt, 'Leave us alone, let us serve the Egyptians'? It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the desert." Moses answered the people, "Do not be afraid. Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring to you today. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You only need be still." Do you notice what it is that Moses tells the people? And can you blame the people? I mean, really, these people know nothing different than living in Egypt. Their ancestors, for 450 years, they've been in bondage in Egypt. Every single one of these Israelites that's marching away from Egypt has never been anywhere else. They've never been more than a couple of miles from the place that they were born. And at first the freedom seems great, and they march out, and then they get to the edge of the Red Sea. Pharaoh changes his mind. The Lord hardens his heart. He rounds up his army, and they come after him, and they look in front of them, and they've got the sea. They look behind them, and here comes Pharaoh. Can you blame them? They're under a lot of pressure here. We're marching into the unknown. We're following Moses. What's going on? We could have stayed there. We could have just stayed there. I mean, generations of our people have stayed there and they've died. Was there no graves there that you had to bring us out here so that we can all die in the desert? And do you notice what Moses says to him? Moses tells them, this is the Lord's battle. God's going to fight for you. Have faith in Him and be still. Just be still. Do you know what Moses is saying? He's saying, just calm down. Take a breath. Breathe. Count to 10. Just relax a little bit and remember who it is that's in charge. God is in charge. He's got this. Remember all of the miracles that are performed back there. That wasn't me. That was God. You've seen what God can do. You've seen how God has let us out of there. And God is going to get us out of this predicament too. All you need to do is just take a breath. Just chill out. Just be still. Do you know why He's telling them to just be still? Because you know what anxiety and fear and worry and pressure does to us? It multiplies. When we let a little bit of fear into our life, a little bit of anxiety into our life, a little bit of worry into our life, when we start getting under this pressure, it just multiplies. That's all we can think about. That's all that we can concentrate on. That's all that we can deal with is what we're going through and what we have to face and everything that's wrong. And it just piles up on us. It's an itch that you just can't scratch enough. And I came up with that idea of an itch that you just can't scratch enough because I'm going to tell you something, folks. I got wound up in some poison oak and poison ivy in the last 2 weeks. We've been clearing some property in our land, and you can't see it through my nice suit this morning, but if you could see my arms, they are like raw hamburger meat. They're horrible. I have been ate alive by poison oak. And you know what poison oak and poison ivy does? It starts in a little spot, and it kind of drains a little bit and itches a little bit, and once you do, oh, that feels so good. And then it spreads. And it gets bigger and bigger. And no matter how much you scratch, the itch never goes away. What it does is it spreads and it makes it worse and makes it worse and makes it worse. And let me interject this in here while I'm talking about this. Anybody that's got any of those good old grandma recipes at home for taking care of poison oak or poison ivy, get them to me because I'd sure use them. But it's an itch that just can't go, you just can't get rid of it. And that's what fear and anxiety and worry does. And sometimes what we have to do is we just have to take a breath. We've just got to stop and breathe. Count to 10. You know, I needed, the day of the power washer incident, what I needed to do was take a breath and sit down and just breathe and count to 10. It wasn't the end of the world. When I ordered the thing, I saw online, they had 13 of them in stock. This wasn't the end of the world. It's going to take me all of, 30 minutes to drive into town and back out again. But the pressure of everything else just built up to where not only was that wrong, but everything else was wrong. The mower was wrong. The weed eater was wrong. Everything was wrong that day because it just builds up and it's one thing after the other after the other. Just sit down and take a breath. And Moses tells the Israelites, this is God's battle. And God is in charge. Just trust in Him and be still. So number one, folks, let's just take a breath. And when we feel the anxiety and the fear, maybe the anger and the pressure building up inside of us, let's just take a breath. Sit down and take God's Word and read it a little bit. And remember who is in charge. So that's our first story. That's our first example this morning, is from the book of Exodus. Our second one comes from the prophet Jeremiah. Turn in your Bibles over to the book of Jeremiah. Jeremiah, the 38th chapter. Jeremiah, the 38th chapter. We're going to start here in the 6th verse. Jeremiah chapter 38, starting in verse 6. King Zedekiah is the king of Israel now, and things are not going well for Israel, and Jeremiah is the prophet that has come to preach to Israel and tell them what God expects. Jeremiah is known as the weeping prophet. You can't find somebody, well, you can. There's a lot of people in the Bible that are great examples of working under pressure, but it seems like Jeremiah's entire ministry is under pressure. He wrote the book of Lamentations because he's lamenting over the state of Israel and his people and all the things that have gone wrong and that they won't turn back to God. And now here in the book of Jeremiah, over in the 38th chapter, we see where again Jeremiah has came to the Israelites and he's told them straight up what's going to happen. The Babylonians are going to take over. And he tells them your best bet is to really, at this point, God's not going to fight for you. At this point right now, your best bet is to just give yourself over to them. Well, that doesn't set very well with some of the king's men. And the king's men want to get rid of Jeremiah. And look over here in Jeremiah, the 38th chapter, starting in the 6th verse. So they took Jeremiah and they put him into the cistern of Malchiah, the king's son, which was in the courtyard of the guards. They lowered Jeremiah by ropes into the cistern. It had no water in it, only mud, and Jeremiah sunk deep down into the mud. But Ebed-Melech, a Cushite, an official in the royal palace, heard that they had put Jeremiah into the cistern. While the king was sitting at the Benjamin gate, Ebed-Melech went to the palace and said to him, My lord the king, these men have acted wickedly in all they have done to Jeremiah the prophet. They've thrown him into a cistern where he will starve to death when there is no longer bread in the city. Then the king commanded Ebed-Melech the Cushite, Take 30 men from here with you and lift Jeremiah from the prophet out of the cistern before he dies. So Ebed-Melech took the men with him, and he went to a room under the treasury in the palace. He took some old rags and worn-out clothes, and from there he let them down with ropes to Jeremiah in the cistern. Ebed-Melech the Cushite said to Jeremiah, Put these old rags and worn-out cloths under your arms to pad the ropes. Jeremiah did so, and they pulled him up with the ropes and lifted him out of the cistern, and Jeremiah remained in the courtyard of the guard. Isn't that a great story? That is a great story about the prophet Jeremiah and what Jeremiah is going through. So here we've got Jeremiah who is telling the people God's word. Some of them don't want to hear it, and they take him and they put him down in this cistern. The cistern's empty of water, but guess what it's got in it? It's got so much mud that Jeremiah begins to sink down into the mud. And when you figure that they went and got cloths and old clothes to lower down to him, to put under his arms, to put the ropes around, they know how buried into this mud that he is. It's going to be hard to pull him out. And sometimes we're buried in the mud, aren't we? And we feel like we're just stuck. And here over the last couple of months, maybe we felt like we're just stuck and buried in the mud to the point that, you know what, I just can't move. I can't, I'm just stuck. and I don't know what to do. I'm just here. I can't get anywhere. I can't go anywhere. I can't do anything. What have I got? But guess what Jeremiah had? Ebed-Melech. He had somebody on his side. He had a friend. He had a friend that was willing to step in for him to help pull him out of the muck and out of the mire and get him up out of the cistern. And Ebed-Melech goes to the king and explains to the king what's going on. And the king says, well, go get Jeremiah out of there. And he does. He goes down and he rescues Jeremiah. You know what our second point is? Our second point this morning is, folks, even though we are socially distant from each other, we still have each other. And one of the best gifts that God has ever given us is the gift of the church and friendship and brothers and sisters who can be there to lift each other up. We are so blessed in this world that we live in today when we are stuck in this quarantine where we're separate but together. Because this morning I can preach this sermon and everybody that's not here can hear it because of the technology that we have. Because of the technology that we have, we may be separate, but we still can be texting each other, FaceTiming each other, talking to each other, calling each other, emailing each other. We can still stay in contact. And if it were not for Jeremiah's friend, who gathered up other friends and came to him and lifted him up out of the muck and out of the mire, he would have been stuck there and he would have just stayed there. But we have friends. Do you know what this story is? I was reading this story and I started thinking to myself, this story right here, if you look at it and you read it, this is the same story that's found over in the book of Luke chapter 5, only in reverse. Over in Luke chapter 5, there's a story of a crippled man who can't stand up and he can't walk, but he has heard that Jesus is in town and he knows there's only one person that can heal me, that's Jesus, but I can't get to him. All I can do is lay here on my mat because I can't get up and can't walk. Well, guess what? He's got friends. And his friends come and they pick him up and they carry him to the house where Jesus is at. And when they get there, there is such a crowd that they cannot get in to see Jesus. But his friends are not going to be deterred. They're going to see to it that they can do what they have to do to help their buddy out. And they climb up on the roof of the house that Jesus is in. And they dig a hole through that roof and they take ropes and they tie him to this guy's bed and they lower him down. It's the story of Jeremiah in reverse in the New Testament. Jeremiah's in the mud and he's stuck and he needs to get back out into the sunshine, and they drop ropes down to him, say, grab on, Jeremiah, we're going to bring you out of the muck. And they drag Jeremiah up out. Over in Luke, the guys say, we know where the light's at and we're going to get you there one way or another, and we'll cut a hole in this roof and just hang on to the ropes. We're going to drop you down there right in front of Jesus. And the guy doesn't have to be lifted back out of that roof. Guess what he does? He stands up, picks up his bed, and he goes. Folks, where would we be without one another? Never be ashamed or embarrassed to go to your brothers and your sisters, to your friends. This is what the church is all about. Even when we are spread apart, we are still the church. And we are brothers and sisters, and we come together to lift each other up. 1 Thessalonians 5:11 says, therefore encourage one another and build each other up, just as in fact you are doing. Hebrews 3:13 says, but encourage one another daily, as long as it's called today. We have great technology today that even when we're separate, we can still encourage one another daily, and we can still lift each other up daily. We can pull each other up out of the muck and the mire that we find ourselves bogged down in. So that's our second story. Number one, our first point is to remember, just take a breath and just be still. Count to 10 when the pressure's getting to you. Number two, go to a friend. Talk to a friend. Talk to a brother or sister, and let them help to lift you up out of the muck and mire. And then number three, we're going to go backwards all the way back to the book of Genesis. Look back to Genesis, the 45th chapter. Look back to Genesis, the 45th chapter. And we're going to start in the 4th verse. This is a story that's familiar to a lot of people. It's towards the end of the story of the life of Joseph. If you remember Joseph, Joseph was one of 12 brothers, but his other brothers, they didn't like him. They didn't like him at all. They were jealous of him. And when he was just a young man, what they did was they conspired at first to murder him. They wanted to kill him to get him out of the way because he was his dad's favorite. But instead of murdering him, what they did was they took him and they sold him off into slavery. And he is taken as a slave from Canaan to Egypt. That's where the Israelites started out, being in Egypt, is with Joseph all these years before. But Joseph is taken there, sold off as a slave. He goes to work in one of the Pharaoh's upper echelon men's homes, Potiphar. He's falsely accused while he's in Potiphar's house. He's thrown in prison. He spends years in prison. He's forgotten while he's in prison. But he's finally brought up out of prison. And through a whole series of events, Joseph, at this point in the story, has found himself the second most powerful man in all of Egypt. A great famine has hit the land. And the whole world is starving, all of them except Egypt, because Egypt, under Joseph's care, has stored up grain and wheat. Well, guess who has to come and ask Joseph for food? His brothers. And there's a whole story there that he hides himself from, and they don't know who he is. But finally he reveals himself to them. And could you imagine how they're thinking? This was little Joseph all those years ago that we threw down in a well, then we dragged out, then we sold him off to slavery, and now he holds our life in the balance. And when they learn this, look over here, Genesis chapter 45, starting in the 4th verse. Then Joseph said to his brothers, "Come close to me." When they had done so, he said to them, "I am your brother Joseph, the one that you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed, and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. For 2 years now there has been famine in the land, and for the next 5 years there will be not any plowing or reaping. But God sent me ahead of you to preserve for you a remnant on earth, and to save your lives by a great deliverance. So then it was not you who sent me here, but God. He made me father to Pharaoh, lord of his entire household, and ruler of all of Egypt." Did you notice what it is that Joseph tells his brothers when they realize who he is? Don't be upset. Don't be mad at yourselves. Don't worry. I'm not going to hurt you. This was God's plan. God sent me here. You guys didn't do it. Yeah, y'all threw me in the well. You sold me off into slavery. But this was part of God's plan. The reason I'm here is because God put me here. Y'all didn't put me here. You were an instrument of God, so that the saving of many lives could take place. He says this was God's plan. Point number 3 is, folks, remember, God is always in control. God always has a plan, and God's plan will always be fulfilled. And Joseph reminds his brothers of that. That God we serve had a plan. And I had to go through a lot. I was under a lot of pressure during that plan. You guys wanted to kill me. Then I was a slave. Then I was falsely accused. Then I was imprisoned. Then I was forgotten. But through all of it, through all of the pressure, through everything that seemed to be going wrong, all that time, God had a plan. And all these years later, that plan is coming to fruition. And folks, I'm going to tell you something right now. God has a plan with what's going on in this country right now. I have talked to more people in the last couple of months that are interested in spiritual matters that never were before than I ever have. I've had people that I would not have ever guessed would even want to open a Bible that have contacted me talking about spiritual matters. God's Word will not be chained. It has been thrown out all over the world because of what's going on. God's in charge. God has a plan. And then finally, we're going to wrap this up this morning with the passage that's on the screen behind me. Matthew chapter 7. For one final point for us this morning. Matthew chapter 7, starting in the 24th verse. Jesus says, "Therefore everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house. Yet it did not fall because it had its foundation on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a mighty crash." Here's our fourth and our final point this morning. Our fourth and our final point this morning. Remember where your house is built. Remember what your foundation is. Folks, if you are a Christian here this morning, if you're a Christian out there online watching us here this morning, Don't forget where your house is built and what foundation it's built upon. If your life and your house is built upon the foundation of Jesus Christ, these storms, all of this that's going on, there's not enough pressure to crack that foundation. Don't forget where your house is built. Now for the rest of the story, real quick. I know I'm running over a little bit here, but I'm kind of like Paul Harvey. You remember Paul Harvey? He always had, and now the rest of the story. So here's the rest of the story, because it doesn't end with the apology at Home Depot. I get the new power washer home, and we get it out, and Brenda's in heaven because she loves to power wash things. She power washes the shed, she power washes the deck, she power washes the front porch, the back porch. She uses it all day long one day. The next day she gets out and she starts power washing again. And I'm out in the backyard working. She says, Ben, this thing's leaking. And I went over there and it had blown an O-ring and it's just spraying water out all over the place. And I'm like, really? You're going to make me do this again? And he did. And guess what? I handled it a whole lot better. I just went back to Home Depot with a smile on my face, and I turned in the old power washer, went back to get the new one, and guess what? There's none there. But then I look up, there's a whole pallet of them up on the top, so I got to go find somebody to get me one down. But I'm breathing, and I'm being still, and I'm going to go find a friend. And I find a friend finally. And he's going to come help me out. And he comes down there to help me out, but somebody else stops him. And he has to help all of these other people. But finally he gets down there, and 30 minutes later he shows up with his little machine, and he lifts up and he comes back down with it. And he says, I'm so sorry that this took so long. It shouldn't have taken this long. And I said, that's okay. And he said, I'm blessed. Listen to this. This is what he said. I'm blessed that I was so busy today that you had to wait. I'm blessed because I got a job. This is what this guy's telling me in the aisle at Home Depot. I'm blessed because I have a job. And I'm blessed that I had so many customers you had to wait. And he's sliding it off his little lift thing, and he's putting it on the dolly that I've got there. And he puts it on the dolly, and he says, and I'm blessed because I've got customers like you that understand. Folks, we can be positive under pressure. Let's be a people who just take a breath. Count to 10. Just be still. Count on our friends. Don't carry all of the burden yourself, but go to your brothers and sisters and count on your friends. And remember, God's always got a plan. And ladies and gentlemen, if we got our house built on that foundation, this storm's not going to crack it. The next storm's not going to crack it. This virus isn't going to break it. There is nothing that's going to rock this foundation. Let's be positive under pressure. Now, the question for you to ask yourself this morning is where do you have your house built? Upon what foundation is it built? Because there's two parts to that last story that we read over in Matthew chapter 7. There are those that have their foundation, their houses built on the foundation of Jesus Christ, and those that don't. If you don't, this storm is going to just tear you up. And the next storm is going to tear you up. But if you do, you know you can get through this. So the question is, where do you have your house built? What foundation do you have your house built on today? If you don't have the foundation of your house as Jesus Christ, of your life as Jesus Christ, I want to encourage you to get that foundation today. It's not too late. You can do it. If you're drawing breath in your lungs today, it's not too late to rebuild the foundation of your life. Jesus says, believe in me as the Son of God. Confess my name before man. Repent of your sins and be baptized for the remission of those sins. If you haven't taken those steps, folks, take those steps today. Those of you that are online that are watching us this morning, if you haven't taken those steps and you want to learn more about those steps, at the end of this service, after the closing prayers, there's going to be a slide comes up that has contact information on it. Please contact us, because we want to help you get your life built on the foundation that's not going to crack, it's not going to waver, it's not going to wobble, it's going to be there. And that's the only way that we're going to stay positive under pressure. If we can help anybody this morning, we're going to sing a song of invitation. If we can invite anybody that's here with us this morning for baptism, for prayer, or for anything, we certainly want to be able to do that. If we can help anybody that's watching us online today, we just ask you contact us. If there's anything that we can do for anyone, we just ask that you come to the front this morning while we sing. Let's all stand and sing, please.